Hi, I'm Nina Reyes. The last time I saw my family all together, I was behind the wheel doing what I always did, getting them where they needed to go while they barely looked up from their phones. My brother Derek leaned forward from the back seat as we pulled up to departures and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You're just the driver." They all laughed. My mom, my dad, even Derek's wife Heather. Like it was the funniest thing they'd heard all week. I kept my hands on the wheel and my mouth shut because that's what I'd been trained to do. Smile, nod, serve, disappear. But that moment, that one careless sentence, cracked something open inside me that I didn't know was waiting to break. What happened after that airport drop changed everything. And now, the same people who dismissed me like I was part of the upholstery are the ones calling, texting, showing up at my door asking why I won't just help them one more time. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning started the way it always did. My phone buzzing before the sun came up, my mother's name flashing across the screen with that particular urgency that meant I was already late for something I hadn't agreed to do. I answered on the third ring, still half asleep, already knowing what was coming. "Nina, sweetheart, we need you to take us to the airport. Derek's flight is at 9 and your father doesn't want to deal with parking." I blinked at the ceiling, processing the fact that it was 6 in the morning and I had a client presentation at 10. The airport was 40 minutes away on a good day. This wasn't a good day. This was a Tuesday in March when everyone in Riverside decided they had somewhere important to be. "Mom, I have a meeting this morning. Can't Derek drive himself?" There was a pause, the kind that carried disappointment like a weight you were supposed to feel through the phone. "He's going on a business trip, Nina. He has a lot on his mind. Besides, it's family. We help each other." I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes, already calculating how much sleep I'd lose, how early I'd have to leave, whether I could reschedule the client or just show up frazzled and hope they didn't notice. "What time do you need me there?" 7:15. "Don't be late. You know how your brother gets." I got there at 7:12. My car, a 10-year-old sedan that had seen better decades, coughed twice before settling into its usual resigned hum. I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house in Maple Ridge, a neighborhood where the lawns were measured for evenness and the mailboxes all matched. My car looked like an apology parked between my dad's pristine truck and Derek's leased BMW. They were waiting on the porch. Derek stood with his arms crossed, checking his watch like I was the reason time moved forward. Heather sat on the porch railing scrolling through her phone, her carry-on bag perched beside her like a trained pet. My parents hovered near the door, Mom clutching her purse, Dad jingling his keys even though he wasn't driving. "You're late," Derek said as I stepped out of the car. "I'm 3 minutes early. Traffic's going to be terrible. We should have left by now." I popped the trunk without responding and watched as Derek loaded his suitcase with the care of someone handling explosives. Heather slid into the back seat without a word, and my parents followed, my mom commenting on the fast food bag I'd forgotten to throw away last week. "Nina, you really should keep your car cleaner. What if you had to take a client somewhere?" "I don't take clients in my car, Mom. I meet them at the office." "Still. It reflects on you." I pulled out of the driveway and merged onto the main road, my hands tight on the wheel, my jaw tighter. The morning sun was just starting to burn through the clouds, casting everything in that flat gray light that made the world look unfinished. No one said thank you. No one asked how I was. Derek immediately started talking about his trip, some corporate conference in Denver where he'd be giving a presentation on brand strategy. "They're flying me out first class," he said, his voice carrying that edge of pride he always got when talking about work. "Should be a good opportunity to network. I've been working on this pitch for weeks." "That's wonderful, honey," my mom said from the back seat, her voice warm in a way it never was when I talked about my projects. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw my dad nodding along, Heather smiling like Derek had just announced he'd solved world hunger. I kept my eyes on the road and said nothing. The traffic thickened as we got closer to Portland, brake lights stretching ahead of us like a string of bad news. Derek sighed dramatically. I told you we should have left earlier. We're fine, I said. You've got plenty of time. Plenty of time is not the same as comfortable time, Nina. I bit the inside of my cheek and changed lanes. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from Violet, my coworker and one of the few people who actually noticed when I existed. Still on chauffeur duty? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not with 4 people in the car who would have asked why I was smiling at my phone, who would have made it about them somehow. We arrived at the airport with 40 minutes to spare. I pulled up to the departures lane and put the car in park. Derek got out first, stretching like he'd just finished a marathon. Heather followed, checking her reflection in the side mirror. My parents climbed out slower, my mom fussing with her coat. I stayed in the driver's seat, hands still on the wheel, waiting for the thank you that never came. Derek pulled his suitcase from the trunk and closed it with more force than necessary. Then he leaned down, looked through the open passenger window, and smiled that smile he always wore when he thought he was being funny. Thanks for the ride. You're a good driver. I mean, that's basically all you're good for, but still. My mom laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A real laugh. My dad grinned and shook his head like Derek had just delivered the punchline of the year. Heather covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking. You're just the driver, Derek added, louder this time, like he wanted the people unloading their cars nearby to hear. And they all laughed again. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white, my chest so tight I thought my ribs might crack. Derek knocked twice on the roof of my car. See you when we get back. Don't forget to pick us up Sunday night. Then they walked away. All 4 of them. Into the terminal. Toward security. Toward their trip, their plans, their lives that didn't include me unless they needed something. I sat there for another 3 minutes, cars honking behind me, an airport cop waving me forward. I put the car in drive and pulled away, and somewhere between the terminal and the freeway on-ramp, I realized I was shaking. Not from anger. Not yet. From something colder. Something that felt like waking up. I made it to my client meeting 17 minutes late. I walked into the conference room at Violet's studio with my portfolio under my arm and an apology already forming on my lips. The clients were sitting at the long table, 2 middle-aged men in business casual, both looking at their phones. Sorry I'm late. Family emergency. It wasn't entirely a lie. Violet shot me a look from across the room, the kind that said we're talking about this later. I sat down, pulled out the designs I'd been working on for the past 2 weeks, and tried to focus. But my hands were still shaking. My mind kept replaying Derek's voice. You're just the driver. The meeting lasted an hour. The clients liked the work. They signed off on the next phase. I smiled, nodded, shook hands, and felt like I was watching myself from a distance. Afterward, Violet cornered me in the break room. What happened? I poured a cup of coffee I didn't want and stared at the steam rising from the mug. Nothing. Just family stuff. Nina, you look like you're about to shatter. I took a sip. Burned my tongue. Didn't care. My brother called me the driver. At the airport. In front of everyone. Violet's face hardened. Tell me you're joking. I wish I was. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, her expression somewhere between disbelief and rage. What did you say? Nothing. I just drove away. Nina. What was I supposed to say, Violet? They were all laughing. She shook her head slowly, her jaw tight. You know that's not okay, right? You know they've been doing this to you for years? I set the mug down carefully, like it might explode. I know. Then why do you keep doing it? Why do you keep showing up for people who treat you like hired help? Because they're my family. The words came out automatic, rehearsed, like I'd said them 1,000 times before. And I had. To myself. To Violet. To anyone who asked why I put up with it. Violet looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. Family doesn't mean you have to let them erase you. I didn't have an answer for that. So I picked up my coffee and went back to my desk, where 3 new emails were waiting. One from my mom asking if I could pick up groceries later. One from Derek asking if I'd look over his presentation slides before his flight. One from my dad asking if I could stop by this weekend to help him reorganize the garage. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring slightly, my chest heavy. Then I closed my laptop and walked out. I drove home in silence. No radio. No podcasts. Just the sound of my engine struggling and my thoughts running laps around the same painful loop. When I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment building in Eastwood, the sun was already starting to dip toward the horizon. The complex was old, the kind with exterior staircases and doors that didn't quite close right, but it was mine. I paid for it. I kept it. No one had a key but me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Inside, the space was small but carefully arranged. A futon that doubled as a couch. A desk covered in sketches and mock-ups. A kitchen the size of a closet. But the walls were covered in my work. Designs I'd never shown my family. Illustrations I'd done late at night when I couldn't sleep. A life I'd built quietly, in the margins, while everyone else was looking somewhere else. I dropped my bag by the door and sank onto the futon, pulling my knees up to my chest. My phone buzzed. Another text from my mom. Did you see Derek's email? He really needs your feedback tonight. I turned the phone face down on the cushion beside me and stared at the wall. For years, I'd told myself it was fine. That this was just what families did. You helped. You showed up. You didn't ask for credit or thanks because that wasn't the point. The point was being there. Being useful. Being good. But sitting there in my quiet apartment, the echo of Derek's laughter still rattling around in my skull, I realized something I'd been avoiding for a long time. I wasn't being good. I was being invisible. And they liked it that way. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the futon staring at the ceiling, watching the headlights from passing cars sweep across the plaster like searchlights looking for something lost. My phone kept buzzing. Derek's emails piling up. Mom asking if I'd gotten back to him yet. Dad wondering if I could swing by tomorrow to help move some boxes in the basement. Each notification felt like a small stone being added to a pile I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and made tea I didn't drink. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, scrolling through old photos on my hard drive. There was one from 5 years ago. Thanksgiving. The whole family gathered around the table at my parents' house. Derek front and center, holding up a wine glass, my dad's hand on his shoulder. My mom beaming. Heather laughing at something off camera. I was in the photo too. Barely. Just the edge of my shoulder visible in the corner, cut off by whoever had taken the shot. I'd been the one who cooked the turkey that year. Spent 2 days preparing sides and desserts. Nobody had asked me to. I'd just done it because that's what I did. I filled the gaps. I made things easier. And when the photo went up on my mom's social media with the caption "Blessed with this beautiful family," I wasn't tagged. Because I wasn't really in it. I closed the laptop and pulled out an old shoebox I kept under my bed. Inside were things I'd saved over the years. Report cards from high school with straight A's that my parents had glanced at once and filed away. A certificate from a design competition I'd won in college that had never made it onto a wall. A birthday card from my 21st birthday signed "Love Mom and Dad" with Derek's name printed underneath like an afterthought. And buried at the bottom, a photo from when I was 16. It was my junior year art show. I'd spent months on a series of illustrations that the school had displayed in the main hallway. I'd been so proud. So nervous. I'd invited my whole family. Derek had a basketball game that night. A scrimmage. Not even a real game. My parents went to that instead. They'd promised they'd come to the art show after, but by the time they arrived, the reception was over. The lights were being turned off. My art teacher was packing up the leftover cookies. We tried, my mom had said. You understand, right? We couldn't miss Derek's game. I'd nodded. Smiled. Said it was fine. In the photo, I was standing alone in front of my work, holding a ribbon I'd won for Best in Show. My art teacher had taken the picture. Behind me, you could see the empty hallway. The folded chairs. The aftermath of something I'd been too late for, even though it was supposed to be mine. I put the photo back in the box and shoved it under the bed. Then I opened my laptop again and started going through my files. Every design project I'd ever worked on. Every freelance job. Every late-night hustle that had kept me fed and rent paid while my family assumed I was doing fine because I never complained. And then I found it. A folder labeled Derek Consulting Projects. I'd forgotten about it. Or maybe I'd just trained myself not to think about it too hard. My stomach dropped as I clicked it open. Inside were dozens of files. Logos I'd designed. Brand guidelines I'd put together. Presentation decks I'd mocked up. All of it stamped with Derek's company name. All of it sent to him over the past 3 years whenever he'd asked for help with a project. Just need a quick favor, sis. You're so good at this stuff. I opened one of the files. A full rebrand I'd done for a local real estate company. I remembered working on it. Derek had called me late on a Thursday, stressed out, saying he had a pitch the next morning and his usual designer had flaked. Could I throw something together? I'd stayed up until 4 in the morning. Sent him 3 concepts. He'd used the second one. 2 weeks later, I saw the announcement on his company's website. Nina Reyes Consulting lands major rebrand contract with Crestwood Properties. The article included quotes from Derek about his creative vision and strategic approach. There was even a photo of him shaking hands with the client in front of a poster board displaying my design. My work. His name. I opened another file. Then another. A tech startup's logo. A nonprofit's fundraising campaign. A restaurant's full visual identity. Every single one of them had been his urgent favors. His emergencies. His career moments that I'd made possible while getting nothing but a quick thanks, you're a lifesaver in return. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the screen washing over me, my hands cold. He'd built his entire reputation on my work. And I'd let him. No. I'd helped him. I grabbed my phone and scrolled back through our text history. There it was. Message after message over the years. Hey, can you make this logo pop more? Client wants revisions by tomorrow. Need a fresh layout for this pitch deck. You free tonight? The color scheme isn't working. Can you fix it real quick? And my responses, every single time. Sure. No problem. I'll have it to you by morning. I'd never asked for credit. I'd never asked to be paid. Because he was my brother. Because that's what family did. Because I wanted to help him succeed. But he'd never once mentioned my name to a client. Never once suggested I meet with them directly. Never once offered to pay me or recommend me or even acknowledge that the work was mine. He'd just taken it. And I just kept giving. The sky outside my window was starting to lighten, turning from black to deep blue to something almost gray. My tea had gone cold hours ago. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff, and walked to the window. The street below was empty except for a jogger passing under the streetlights and a delivery truck idling at the corner. The world was waking up. People were starting their days. And I was standing in my apartment realizing I'd spent years building someone else's life while mine stayed small and quiet and invisible. My phone buzzed. Another email. Derek again. Nina, really need that feedback on the slides. Presentations in 6 hours. I stared at the message. Then I looked back at my laptop screen. At the folder full of stolen work. At the evidence of everything I'd given away. And for the first time in my life, I didn't answer. I called in sick to work. Violet didn't believe me, but she didn't push. I spent the day doing something I'd never done before. I documented everything. I opened a new folder and labeled it evidence. Then I went through every file, every email, every text message where Derek had asked for work and I delivered. I took screenshots. I saved timestamps. I matched my original files with the finished projects on his company's website. It took hours. By the time I finished, the folder was full of proof. Proof that Derek's biggest wins weren't his. Proof that the consultant everyone praised for his innovative design thinking couldn't design his way out of a paper bag. Proof that I'd been erased deliberately, systematically, for years. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. My chest felt lighter. Or maybe heavier. I couldn't tell anymore. Around noon, my mom called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again 20 minutes later. I answered on the 4th ring. Nina, where have you been? Derek's been trying to reach you all morning. I'm not feeling well. Well, he really needs your help. His presentation's this afternoon and he says the slides aren't right. I stared at the wall. At a painting I'd done in college that had never been good enough to show my parents. At the life I'd built in secret while they looked past me toward my brother's shinier, louder one. He'll figure it out. There was a pause. A long one. Excuse me? I said he'll figure it out. I'm sure he's very capable. Nina, this is important. This is his career. And what about mine, Mom? The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Sharper than I'd ever spoken to her before. What are you talking about? Do you even know what I do for a living? Another pause. Longer this time. Of course I do. You do graphic design or something. Or something. Right. Nina, what's gotten into you? I'm just tired, Mom. I'm tired of being the person everyone calls when they need something and forgets about the rest of the time. That's not fair. We don't forget about you. When's my birthday? Silence. When's my birthday, Mom? I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. I could picture her standing in her kitchen, holding the phone, her face pinched with confusion and annoyance. I don't have my calendar in front of me. It was 3 weeks ago. I hung up. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was something sharper. Something that felt like a door opening. The phone rang again immediately. I declined the call. It rang again. Declined. A text appeared. We need to talk about your attitude. I turned my phone off and sat in the silence of my apartment. Outside, I could hear someone's dog barking. A car door slamming. Life continuing like nothing had changed. But something had changed. I'd stopped pretending. That evening, Violet showed up at my door with takeout and a look that said she wasn't leaving until I talked. You're spiraling, she said, setting the bags on my counter. I'm fine. You hung up on your mom. That's not fine for you. That's seismic. I unpacked the food without responding. Thai noodles. Spring rolls. Violet knew my favorites. She always had. We ate in silence for a few minutes before she set her fork down and looked at me. What happened? I told her everything. The airport. The laughter. The folder full of stolen work. The years of being the person who made everything possible while staying completely invisible. She listened without interrupting, her expression darkening with every sentence. When I finished, she sat back and crossed her arms. You need to do something about this. Like what? Like stop letting them use you. Like tell Derek what he's been doing is theft. Like send that evidence somewhere it matters. And then what? They'll hate me. Nina, they already don't see you. What's the difference? The words landed hard. I looked down at my noodles, my appetite gone. Violet reached across the table and grabbed my hand. You're one of the most talented designers I know. You could be running your own studio. You could be the one winning awards and landing clients. But instead you're spending every night doing free work for a man who wouldn't credit you if his life depended on it. I know. Then stop knowing and start doing something. She squeezed my hand once and let go. Then she pulled out her phone and started typing. What are you doing? Finding you a lawyer. Or at least someone who can tell you what your options are. Violet. Don't violet me. You're not going to let this go. Not this time. She was right. I wasn't. 2 days later, I sat in a small office across from a man named Troy Bennett. He was a financial consultant who specialized in creative industry disputes. Violet had found him through a friend of a friend. He wore glasses and a button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and he listened to my story without interrupting once. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. Do you have contracts for any of this work? I shook my head. Did he ever pay you? No. It was always just favors. Troy sighed. That makes it harder. But not impossible. He gestured to the folder I'd brought. The one full of screenshots and files and timestamps. This is good. This shows a clear pattern. The question is, what do you want to do about it? I don't know. I just want him to stop pretending it's his work. Troy nodded slowly. We can send a cease and desist. Make it clear that any future use of your work without proper credit and compensation will result in legal action. And if he doesn't stop, then we escalate. But Nina, I have to be honest with you. This kind of case is messy. It's family. It's going to get ugly. I looked down at my hands. At the calluses on my fingers from years of holding pencils and styluses. At the proof that I existed, even if my family had spent years acting like I didn't. It's already ugly, I said. Troy smiled. Just a little. Then let's clean it up. The envelope arrived at Derek's office on a Wednesday morning. I didn't see it happen, but Troy sent me a photo of the tracking confirmation. Delivered and signed for at 9:43 in the morning. I imagined Derek opening it between meetings, expecting another contract or client proposal, finding instead 3 pages of legal terminology that boiled down to one simple message: stop stealing my work or face the consequences. I was at Violet's studio when my phone started ringing. Derek's name flashed across the screen. I let it ring through to voicemail. He called again. Then again. On the 4th call, Violet looked up from her desk. You going to answer that? Nope. Good. The call stopped around lunch, replaced by a text that appeared while I was microwaving leftover rice. We need to talk. This is ridiculous. I deleted it without responding. Another one came through 5 minutes later. You're really going to involve lawyers over some design work? After everything I've done for you? I stared at that one longer. After everything I've done for you. As if letting me drive him to the airport counted as a favor he'd granted me. As if asking me to pick up his dry cleaning or watch his house while he was on vacation was generosity on his part. I typed out a response. Deleted it. Typed another one. Deleted that too. Finally settled on something simple. You've done nothing for me, Derek. That's the problem. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The 3 dots appeared immediately. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then my phone rang. This time it was my mother. I answered. Nina Reyes, what on earth is going on? Her voice had that sharp edge it got when she was about to lecture me about respect or responsibility or whatever value she decided I was failing to uphold that day. I'm handling something with Derek. It doesn't concern you. Doesn't concern me? He's your brother. You sent legal threats to his office. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is for him? I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, my jaw clenching. Do you have any idea how humiliating it's been for me to watch him take credit for my work for 3 years? What work? He pays professionals for his design needs. No, Mom. He pays nothing. He asks me. He's been asking me since he started his consulting business. Every logo, every brand package, every presentation deck he's ever pitched came from me. And he's never once mentioned my name. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, could picture her standing in her kitchen trying to process information that didn't fit the story she'd built about her golden son. Well, you should have said something if it bothered you. I did. Every time I sent him a file. Every time I stayed up late finishing his emergencies. Every time I asked if he was going to credit me and he said we'll figure it out later. Her voice shifted, taking on that syrupy reasonable tone she used when she wanted to end an argument without actually addressing it. Family helps each other, Nina. You know that. We don't keep score. You're right. You don't keep score. You just keep taking. I hung up before she could respond. My hand was trembling. Violet was watching me from across the room. You okay? No. But I will be. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a group text. My mom had added me back into the family chat I hadn't realized I'd been removed from until that moment. Mom, we need to discuss this situation like adults. Dad, Nina, call your mother back. Derek, this is insane. I've supported your little hobby for years and this is how you repay me? I read that last message 3 times. Your little hobby. As if the work I did to pay my rent and keep myself fed was something I did for fun on weekends. As if design wasn't a real job unless it came with a corporate title and a leased BMW. Heather chimed in next. Heather, Derek is really hurt by this. Maybe you should think about how your actions affect other people. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead I typed one sentence into the chat. I'm thinking about how my work affects Derek's bank account. Then I muted the conversation and put my phone face down on the desk. Violet walked over and sat on the edge of my workspace. They're going to keep pushing. I know. You ready for that? I looked up at her. At the one person in my life who'd seen me clearly from the beginning. Who'd never asked me to shrink or serve or disappear. I don't have a choice anymore. She nodded. Good. Because they're not going to make this easy. She was right. Over the next week, the pressure built like water behind a dam. My father called and left a voicemail about family loyalty and forgiveness. My mother sent a long email about how disappointed she was in my selfishness. Derek swung between rage and manipulation, one day threatening to countersue for defamation, the next day asking if we could just forget about the whole thing and move on. But the worst part wasn't the pressure from them. It was the quiet realization of how deep the patterns ran. I was going through old emails when I found a thread from 2 years ago. My parents had been planning a surprise party for Derek's 30th birthday. My mother had sent out a mass email to the family asking everyone to contribute to a gift. A new camera for his hiking trips. 15 people had chipped in. The camera cost $1,800. My birthday that same year had been acknowledged with a text message at 9 at night. Happy birthday, sweetie, hope you had a good day. I scrolled further back. Found an email chain about a family vacation to the coast. Everyone discussing dates and rental houses and who would drive. I'd been included on the thread but no one had responded when I'd suggested dates that worked for my schedule. They'd picked the week I'd already told them I had a work deadline. When I'd said I couldn't make it, my mother had written back with "I guess we'll miss you," and that was the end of it. No one had asked me to reschedule the deadline. No one had suggested moving the trip by a week. They'd just gone without me and posted photos of the whole family on the beach with captions about quality time and making memories. I wasn't in a single photo. I closed my laptop and stared at the wall. It wasn't just Derek. It was all of them. A system they'd built where I was useful but not valued. Present but not seen. Expected to show up and shut up and be grateful for the scraps of attention they threw my way. That night I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about the airport. About Derek's voice. "You're just the driver." About the laughter that had followed. Easy, careless, like it was the most natural thing in the world to reduce me to a role. Around midnight my phone buzzed. A message from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi Nina. My name is Claudia Price. I'm a journalist with Portland Business Monthly. I came across some interesting information about Derek Reyes and his consulting firm. Would you be willing to talk?" I sat up slowly, my heart starting to pound. "How did you get my number?" "A mutual contact thought you might have insight into some discrepancies we've been looking into regarding original creative work and attribution." I stared at the message. Then I looked at the folder on my laptop. The evidence I'd gathered. The proof that sat there waiting for someone to care enough to look at it. What kind of discrepancies? The kind that involves someone building a career on work they didn't create. I typed back slowly. "I might be able to help with that." We agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop in downtown Portland. Brewster's Corner, a place with good espresso and corner booths where you could talk without being overheard. I got there early and ordered tea I didn't drink, watching the door, half convinced I'd made a mistake. Claudia arrived exactly on time. She was in her 40s, with short dark hair and glasses, carrying a leather bag that looked like it had survived several years of hard use. She spotted me immediately and walked over. "Nina?" I nodded. She sat down across from me and pulled out a notebook and a small digital recorder. "Do you mind if I record this?" "Depends on what you're planning to do with it." She smiled slightly. "Fair. I'm working on an article about ethics in the consulting industry. Specifically about creative professionals who outsource design work without proper attribution or compensation. Your brother's name came up in my research." "How?" "I have a source who worked with his firm last year. They mentioned that the quality of his design work seemed inconsistent. Sometimes brilliant, sometimes barely competent. When I started digging, I noticed that his best projects all appeared within the last 3 years. Around the time you started working as a freelance designer." I took a sip of tea. It had gone cold. "What do you want from me?" "The truth. Did you create the work he's been presenting as his own?" I met her eyes. They were sharp but not unkind. The eyes of someone who'd heard a lot of stories and knew how to spot the real ones. "Yes." "Do you have proof?" I pulled out my laptop and opened the evidence folder. Showed her the files with creation dates and metadata. The emails where Derek had requested urgent help. The side-by-side comparisons of my original work and his published projects. She went through everything methodically, taking notes, asking questions. How long had this been going on? Had he ever paid me? Had he ever offered credit? Did anyone else know? I answered as honestly as I could. When I finished, she sat back and closed her notebook. "This is substantial, Nina. If I publish this, it's going to create problems for him. He created problems for himself." She nodded slowly. "I need to verify a few things independently. Talk to some of his clients. Check public records. But if this holds up, I'd like to run the story next month." "What do you need from me?" "Just your permission to use your name and your work as evidence. And maybe a quote about why you're coming forward now." I thought about that. About what I wanted to say. About the years of being invisible and the moment at the airport when I'd finally seen myself clearly. Tell them I'm tired of driving other people to their destinations while mine gets further away. Claudia smiled and wrote it down. The article ran 3 weeks later. I found out because Violet texted me at 7 in the morning with a link and 3 exclamation points. The headline read, "Local consultant built reputation on sister's uncredited design work." I opened it with shaking hands. The piece was thorough. Claudia had interviewed 3 of Derek's former clients who confirmed that the quality of his work had dropped significantly in recent months. She'd obtained public records showing that his firm had never employed a designer. She'd tracked down the metadata on several of his published projects and matched them to files I'd created. And she'd included a statement from me. For years, I provided design work to my brother under the assumption that family supports family. What I didn't realize was that support was only expected to flow in one direction. I'm coming forward now because I want other creative professionals to know that their work has value, even if the people closest to them refuse to see it. Below the article was a gallery of side-by-side comparisons. My original files next to Derek's published work. The dates clearly visible. The truth undeniable. My phone started ringing immediately. I turned it off. By noon, the article had been shared across several industry forums. By evening, it was trending on local social media. People were tagging Derek's business page, demanding accountability. Clients were posting public statements distancing themselves from his firm. One company announced they were reviewing their contract for possible breach of ethics clauses. Violet came over that night with wine and takeout. We sat on my futon watching my phone buzz with notifications I refused to check. "How do you feel?" she asked. Terrified. "Good. That means it mattered." I looked at her. What if I just made everything worse? Worse than what? Worse than spending the rest of your life erasing yourself so other people can shine? I didn't have an answer for that. We ate in comfortable silence, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to calm. Not peace exactly, but the kind of quiet that comes after a storm when you're still standing and the sky is starting to clear. My phone buzzed one more time. I almost ignored it. But something made me look. It was a message from Aunt Carmen. My father's sister. The one family member I'd always felt saw me, even if she'd never said it out loud. "I'm proud of you. Call me when you're ready." I set the phone down and exhaled slowly. Maybe I hadn't made everything worse. Maybe I'd just finally made myself visible. The invitation arrived in my mailbox on a Thursday afternoon, tucked between a utility bill and a grocery store flyer. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of formal announcement that made you feel important just holding it. I almost threw it away without opening it. Then I saw my parents' return address in the corner. Inside was an invitation to Derek's award ceremony. The Riverside Business Council was honoring local entrepreneurs at their annual gala, and Derek had been nominated for innovation in brand strategy. The event was in 2 weeks at the Craftsman table, the kind of restaurant where entrees cost more than my weekly grocery budget and the waitstaff wore ties. There was a handwritten note paper clipped to the invitation. My mother's looping cursive. "Nina, we hope you'll put aside this unpleasantness and join us to celebrate your brother's achievement. Family should be together for moments like this." No apology. No acknowledgement of the article that had been circulating for 3 weeks. No mention of the clients Derek had lost or the reputation he was scrambling to salvage. Just an expectation that I would show up, smile, and pretend none of it had happened. I set the invitation on my kitchen counter and stared at it for a long time. Violet came over that evening to help me finish a rush project for a new client. A small nonprofit that needed a complete rebrand before their fundraising gala. Real work. Work with my name on it. Work that paid. She spotted the invitation immediately. "Please tell me you're not going." "I don't know, Nina. It's complicated." She picked up the invitation and read it, her expression darkening with each line. "There's nothing complicated about this. They're asking you to come watch them celebrate him for work you did. That's not complicated. That's cruel." "I know. Then why are you even considering it?" I sat down heavily on the futon, rubbing my face. Because part of me wants to see what happens. Part of me wants to watch him stand up there and accept an award for innovation while everyone in that room knows the truth. Violet set the invitation down carefully. "And what if they don't know?" What if your family spent the last 3 weeks doing damage control and convincing everyone that the article was exaggerated or vindictive or just flat out wrong? Then I'll know exactly who they are. She studied me for a moment, then sighed. If you go, I'm coming with you. You don't have to do that. I know. But I'm not letting you walk into that room alone. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of my closet trying to figure out what you wear to watch your family pretend you don't exist. I settled on a simple black dress I'd bought for client meetings, the one that made me look professional and put together even when I felt like I was falling apart. Violet arrived at 6 wearing a burgundy jumpsuit and the kind of confidence I wished I could borrow. You look good, she said. I look terrified. Same thing. We drove to the Craftsman table in her car, my hands twisted together in my lap, my stomach churning. The restaurant sat on a hill overlooking the Willamette River, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs and windows that turned the sunset into a painting. The parking lot was full of expensive cars and people in evening wear. Laughing and networking like this was the most natural thing in the world. I felt like an imposter. Like someone who'd snuck past security and was about to be caught. Violet squeezed my hand once before we got out of the car. You belong here more than any of them. I wasn't sure I believed her, but I nodded anyway. Inside, the restaurant had been transformed into an event space. Round tables draped in white linens, centerpieces of eucalyptus and roses, a small stage set up at the far end with a podium and a screen for presentations. People milled around holding glasses of wine, their voices creating that particular hum of professional socializing. I spotted my family immediately. They were at a table near the front, dressed like they were attending a wedding. My mother in a navy gown, my father in a suit I'd never seen before, Derek in a perfectly tailored charcoal ensemble that probably cost more than my rent. Heather sat beside him in something sparkly, her hand resting possessively on his arm. They hadn't seen me yet. I could still leave. Walk back out to the parking lot, drive home, pretend I'd never come. Then my mother turned and our eyes met across the room. Her expression went through several shifts in rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, something that might have been anger or fear, and finally a strained smile that didn't reach her eyes. She said something to my father, who turned to look. Then Derek noticed, his jaw tightening visibly even from a distance. Violet touched my elbow. Still want to do this? Too late now. We found seats at a table near the back, far enough away that I didn't have to make small talk but close enough that I could see everything. A woman in her 50s sat next to me and introduced herself as Margaret, the owner of a local bookstore. She was friendly in that effortless way some people have, asking about my work without being nosy, complimenting Violet's jumpsuit, making the kind of conversation that felt like a life raft. The lights dimmed and a man in a crisp suit took the stage. He welcomed everyone to the annual gala, made a few jokes about the local business community, and began introducing the evening's honorees. There were 5 awards. Excellence in Community Service. Breakthrough Startup of the Year. Lifetime Achievement. And then Innovation in Brand Strategy. Derek's category. The screen behind the podium lit up with a montage of his work. Logos and brand packages and marketing campaigns, all presented with sleek transitions and upbeat music. I recognized every single piece. The real estate rebrand. The tech startup logo. The nonprofit's fundraising materials. All of it mine. All of it presented as his. My hands were shaking. Violet reached over and held one of them tightly. On the screen, a testimonial from one of Derek's clients played. A middle-aged man in a polo shirt talking about how Derek's innovative approach had transformed their business. How his fresh perspective and creative vision had taken them to the next level. I felt sick. Then the presenter called Derek's name and the room erupted in polite applause. Derek stood, buttoning his jacket, flashing that confident smile he'd perfected over years of getting everything he wanted. He walked to the stage like he owned it, shook the presenter's hand, accepted a glass plaque with his name engraved on it. He stepped up to the microphone and the applause faded. Thank you so much for this honor, he began, his voice smooth and practiced. Building a brand isn't just about aesthetics. It's about understanding your client's story and translating that into something visual and memorable. It's about innovation, yes, but also about heart. I watched him speak. Watched him talk about vision and creativity and the importance of staying true to your artistic integrity. Watched him accept praise for work he hadn't done, for talent he didn't have, for a career he'd built on my back. And then something unexpected happened. The screen behind him flickered. The slideshow that had been displaying his portfolio stuttered, froze, and then changed. Suddenly the screen was showing something different. Side-by-side comparisons. On the left, Derek's published work. On the right, my original files complete with creation dates and metadata. The room went silent. Derek turned to look at the screen, his face draining of color. He turned back to the audience, his mouth opening and closing like he was trying to find words that wouldn't come. The next slide appeared. An email thread. Derek asking for urgent help with a project. My response agreeing to do it. The timestamp showing I'd sent the finished work at 2 a.m. Another slide. A text message. Derek, can you make this logo look less amateur? Me, sure, I'll rework it tonight. Another. A screenshot of the Portland Business Monthly article with the headline clearly visible. Someone in the audience gasped. Murmurs rippled through the room. People pulled out their phones, probably searching for the article, probably finding it in seconds. Derek stepped back from the microphone, holding up his hands. There's been a misunderstanding. But his voice was shaking. And everyone could see it. I didn't move. Didn't react. Just sat there watching as the truth played out on a screen the size of a wall in front of 200 people who'd come to celebrate innovation and integrity. The presenter returned to the stage, his expression carefully neutral. We'll take a brief intermission. The lights came up. The room exploded into conversation. People were leaning toward each other, whispering, pointing at their phones. My parents sat frozen at their table, my mother's face pale, my father staring straight ahead like he could will himself somewhere else. Derek had disappeared. Probably fled to the bathroom or the parking lot or anywhere that wasn't that stage. Violet leaned close. Did you do that? I shook my head. I swear I didn't. Then who? A man approached our table. Older, maybe 60, with wire-rimmed glasses and a kind face. He looked at me directly. Nina Reyes? Yes. I'm Richard Chen. I'm on the board of the Business Council. I think we need to talk. He led us to a quiet corner near the bar, away from the chaos of the main room. Violet stayed close, her presence a steady anchor. Richard pulled out his phone and showed me an email. We received this 2 days ago. Anonymous sender. It included all the files that just appeared on that screen, along with documentation proving they belonged to you. I stared at the email, my mind racing. I didn't send this. I didn't think you did. The sender made it clear they were acting independently. They said, and I'm quoting here, the Business Council should know who they're actually honoring. Who sent it? We don't know. The email was routed through several servers. Very deliberately anonymous. He put his phone away and looked at me seriously. I've read the article. I've reviewed the evidence. And I've spent the last 2 days trying to verify everything independently. It all checks out. So what happens now? Now we rescind the award. And we owe you an apology. This should never have happened. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt vindicated. Part of me just felt tired. Richard continued. We'd like to invite you to speak. Tonight. If you're willing. Speak. Tell your story. Let people hear directly from you what happened and why it matters. My heart started pounding. I don't think I can do that. You don't have to. But I think you should know that a lot of people in this room are designers, marketers, creative professionals. They need to hear this. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's real. Violet touched my arm. He's right. You should do it. I looked at her, then at Richard, then out at the room beyond where people were still whispering and staring at their phones and trying to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. Okay, I said quietly. I'll do it. Richard nodded and walked back toward the stage to speak with the event coordinator. Violet grabbed both my hands. You're sure about this? No. But I'm doing it anyway. The lights dimmed again. The room slowly settled. Richard returned to the podium, his expression grave. Ladies and gentlemen, we've encountered an unusual situation tonight. After careful review, the Business Council has decided to rescind the Innovation in Brand Strategy Award. More gasps. More murmuring. We've also invited someone to speak who we should have heard from much sooner. Please welcome Nina Reyes. The room turned to look at me. 200 pairs of eyes. I stood slowly, my legs shaking, and walked toward the stage. Each step felt impossibly long. By the time I reached the podium, my hands were trembling so badly I had to grip the edges to keep them still. I looked out at the audience. Saw my parents sitting rigid at their table. Saw empty seats where Derek and Heather had been. Saw Violet near the back giving me a thumbs up. Saw Margaret from the bookstore watching with an expression of fierce encouragement. I took a breath. My name is Nina Reyes. And for the past 3 years, I've been the person actually doing the work my brother was just honored for. My voice cracked slightly, but I kept going. I didn't come here tonight to ruin anything. I came because I wanted to see what would happen. I wanted to know if the truth mattered. And I think tonight proved that it does. I told them everything. About the late-night requests and the urgent favors. About sending work at 2 in the morning and never seeing my name attached to it. About being reduced to just the driver while everyone laughed. I didn't do this for revenge. I did this because I got tired of being invisible. Tired of watching someone else live the life I was building for them. Tired of pretending that family means accepting whatever treatment you're given without question. My voice steadied as I spoke. The fear burned away, replaced by something clearer. If you're in this room and you've ever given your work away for free because someone said it was just a favor, please know your work has value. If you've ever let someone take credit because you didn't want to cause problems, please know you deserve recognition. And if you've ever been told you're being selfish for wanting what you've earned, please know you're not. I paused, looking at my mother. She was staring at her lap. Some people will never see you the way you deserve to be seen. And that's not your failure. It's theirs. I stepped back from the microphone. The room was silent for a long moment. Then someone started clapping. Margaret. Then Violet. Then others joined in, the applause building until it filled the space. I walked off the stage on legs that barely held me, and Violet met me halfway, pulling me into a fierce hug. You did it, she whispered. I did it. We left before the ceremony resumed. Walked out into the cool night air and stood in the parking lot looking up at the stars barely visible through the city lights. My phone buzzed. A text from Aunt Carmen. Watched the live stream. You were magnificent. Come see me when you're ready. We have a lot to talk about. I showed it to Violet. Live stream? She pulled out her phone and searched. Sure enough, someone had been streaming the ceremony. The video of my speech already had thousands of views. Oh God. Oh God is right. You're about to go viral. I leaned against her car and laughed. Actually laughed. Because what else could I do? I just told my truth in front of 200 people and whoever else was watching online. There was no taking it back. No pretending it hadn't happened. And for the first time in my life, I didn't want to. The morning after the gala, I woke up to 700 new Instagram followers and an inbox full of messages from strangers. Some were supportive. Some were curious. A few were hostile, calling me bitter or vindictive or accusing me of trying to destroy my brother's career for attention. I deleted the hostile ones and read through the supportive messages slowly. There were other designers sharing their own stories of stolen work. Freelancers who'd been asked to do just one more favor that turned into months of unpaid labor. Younger siblings who'd spent their lives being compared to golden children who could do no wrong. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Jasmine who ran a small creative agency in Seattle. "I saw your speech last night. I've been in this industry for 15 years and I've never seen anyone articulate what so many of us have experienced. Would you be interested in speaking at our next industry meetup? We'd love to have you share your story with our community." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. I'm not a public speaker. I'm just someone who finally said something. Her response came back quickly. "That's exactly why people need to hear from you." I forwarded the message to Violet, who called me immediately. "You're doing it." "I haven't even decided yet." "Nina, you just gave a speech in front of hundreds of people. You can handle a meetup." That was different. I was angry. So stay angry. Channel it. Use it. I thought about that. About the anger I'd carried for so long, thinking it made me petty or ungrateful. About how it had actually been the thing that finally gave me a voice. Okay. I'll do it. Good. Now check your email. You've got 3 client inquiries from last night. She was right. 3 different businesses had reached out asking about design work. Real paying work with contracts and deadlines and my name in the credits. One was a tech startup that had seen the side-by-side comparisons at the gala and been impressed by my portfolio. Another was a local restaurant looking for a complete rebrand. The third was from someone who simply wrote, "I want to work with someone who values their own worth enough to fight for it." I spent the morning responding to inquiries and setting up consultations. By noon, I had more potential work lined up than I'd had in the previous 6 months combined. Around 2, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and saw my father standing in the hallway, hands in his pockets, looking older than I remembered. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Dad." "Nina. Can we talk?" "About what?" He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "About what happened last night." "About everything." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You have 5 minutes." He nodded and took a breath. "Your mother and I have been talking. We didn't realize how serious this situation was. We thought you and Derek were just having a disagreement." "A disagreement?" "Yes. We didn't understand the extent of what was happening." "You didn't understand because you didn't ask. You just assumed I was being difficult." He flinched slightly but didn't argue. "You're right. We should have asked. We should have listened." "So why didn't you?" "Because," he paused, searching for words. "Because it was easier to believe Derek. Because he's always been the one who succeeded in obvious ways. And you've always been so capable, so independent. We thought you were fine." "I wasn't fine, Dad. I was invisible." He looked down at his shoes. "I know that now. Do you? Or are you just here because I embarrassed the family in public?" His head snapped up. "That's not fair. Isn't it? Where were you 3 weeks ago when the article came out? Where were you when Derek was threatening to sue me? Where were you when Mom was sending emails about how disappointed she was in my selfishness?" He had no answer for that. "I'm here now," he said quietly. "That's not enough." We stood there in silence for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "I found this going through some old boxes. I thought you should have it." He handed it to me and I opened it carefully. Inside was a program from my junior year art show. The one they'd missed because of Derek's basketball game. Someone had circled my name in the program and written in the margin, "Best in Show." The handwriting was my father's. "You were there?" "I came back after the game." "You'd already left." "Your art teacher gave me this." I kept it. I stared at the program, at the proof that he'd cared enough to come back even if it was too late. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because I didn't know what to say. I'd already failed you. Showing up after the fact didn't fix that. No. It didn't. I handed the program back to him, but he shook his head. Keep it. I don't need a reminder of my mistakes. But maybe you need proof that someone saw you, even when it felt like nobody did. He turned to leave, then stopped. I can't undo the past, Nina. But I'm asking for a chance to do better going forward. I don't know if I can give you that right now. He nodded slowly. I understand. But the offer stands. Whenever you're ready. He walked down the hallway and disappeared into the stairwell. I closed the door and looked at the program in my hands. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even close to making things right. But it was something. A crack in the wall. A possibility. I set it on the counter next to the gala invitation and went back to work. The weeks that followed were strange. My phone kept ringing with opportunities. The Seattle meetup turned into a panel discussion. The panel discussion led to an interview with a design podcast. The podcast led to inquiries from people who wanted me to consult on their own creative businesses. I wasn't famous. But I was visible in a way I'd never been before. And with that visibility came a kind of reckoning. Derek's business collapsed within a month. 3 major clients terminated their contracts citing ethical concerns. His website went dark. His social media accounts disappeared. I heard through Aunt Carmen that he'd moved to Sacramento to start over with a different company, this time in sales instead of consulting. I didn't feel triumphant about it. I just felt tired. My mother reached out once, a carefully worded email that apologized for not seeing the situation clearly while also managing to avoid taking any real responsibility. I didn't respond. Not because I was punishing her, but because I didn't have the energy to explain why her apology wasn't enough. But Aunt Carmen became a steady presence. We met for coffee every other week, and she told me stories I'd never heard before. About how she'd watched me grow up always trying to earn a place at a table that had never been set for me. About how she'd wanted to say something but hadn't known how without destroying what little family cohesion existed. You were always the strong one, she said one afternoon at Brewster's Corner. But nobody should have to be that strong alone. I'm learning that. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Your grandmother would be proud of you. She never liked the way your parents played favorites. She used to tell me that every child deserves to be seen. I smiled at that. At the idea that someone in my family had understood, even if she was no longer around to say it. 3 months after the gala, I signed a lease on a small studio space in Eastwood. It wasn't much. Just 1 room with good light and enough space for a proper desk and a meeting area. But it had a window that faced the street and a door with my name on it. Nina Reyes Design. Violet helped me move in, along with a few other designers I'd met through the industry meetups. We spent the day arranging furniture and hanging my work on the walls. Not Derek's work. Mine. The pieces I'd created for myself over the years when nobody was watching. At the end of the day, we stood in the doorway looking at what we'd built. How does it feel? Violet asked. Real. It feels real. She bumped my shoulder with hers. You did this. Nobody handed it to you. You built it. We built it, I corrected. I couldn't have done this without you. She smiled. That's what actual support looks like. Remember that next time someone asks you to shrink yourself to fit their story. I would remember. I was already remembering. That evening, after everyone had left and the studio was quiet, I sat at my new desk and opened my laptop. There was an email from the Seattle agency. They wanted to know if I'd be interested in teaching a workshop on advocating for yourself in creative industries. How to set boundaries. How to recognize when you're being exploited. How to walk away from situations that diminish you. I typed out a response. I'd be honored. Before I hit send, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hey Nina. It's Derek. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. I'm not asking for forgiveness or trying to make excuses. I just wanted you to know that I've spent the last few months thinking about what I did. About how I treated you. And I'm sorry. Really sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it. I hope you're doing well. You deserve good things. I read the message 3 times. Looked for the catch. The manipulation. The subtle guilt trip. But it wasn't there. It was just an apology. Incomplete and late, but present. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I saved the message and closed my phone. Maybe one day I'd write back. Maybe I wouldn't. But either way, my worth wasn't tied to whether he understood what he'd taken from me. I finished the email to Seattle and hit send. Then I pulled out a sketchbook and started drawing. Not for a client. Not for a deadline. Just for myself. The studio was quiet except for the sound of pencil on paper and the distant hum of traffic outside. The light was fading, turning everything golden, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. A week later, I was working on a logo design when my phone rang. Aunt Carmen's name flashed across the screen. Hey, I answered. Nina, are you sitting down? Should I be worried? No. The opposite. I just got off the phone with your father. Oh. He and your mother want to have dinner. Just the 3 of you. No Derek. No Heather. Just them and you. I set my pencil down. Why? Because they want to apologize properly. Face to face. And because your father told me he's been going to therapy. Therapy? Apparently your speech made him realize some things. About how he was raised. About patterns he's repeated. He wants to break them. I leaned back in my chair, processing. What do you think I should do? That's up to you, sweetheart. But I think people deserve a chance to change if they're actually putting in the work. You don't owe them forgiveness. But maybe you owe yourself the chance to hear what they have to say. I thought about the program my father had kept. About the small evidence that he'd cared, even when he'd failed to show it in ways that mattered. Okay. I'll have dinner with them. You sure? No. But I'll do it anyway. The dinner was scheduled for the following Sunday at a small Italian restaurant near the river. Neutral territory. I arrived 10 minutes late on purpose, needing the psychological advantage of making them wait. They were already seated when I walked in. My mother looked nervous, her hands folded on the table. My father stood when he saw me, then seemed to realize he didn't know what to do next and sat back down. I slid into the booth across from them. Hi. Hi, honey, my mother said. Her voice was smaller than I remembered. Thank you for coming. I nodded but didn't respond. The server came by and took our drink orders. Water for all of us. Nobody was pretending this was a celebration. When the server left, my father cleared his throat. We've been doing a lot of thinking these past few months. About how we treated you. About the assumptions we made. My mother added, we were wrong, Nina. About so many things. And we're sorry. I waited. There had to be more. My father continued. I've been talking to a therapist about family dynamics. About favoritism and how it damages everyone involved, not just the person being excluded. I'm starting to understand that we didn't just fail you. We failed Derek too by never holding him accountable. How is Derek? I asked. My mother hesitated. He's struggling. But he's also starting to face some hard truths about himself. He asked us to tell you he understands if you never want to speak to him again. I don't know what I want yet, I said honestly. That's fair, my father said. You don't owe us anything, Nina. Not forgiveness, not a relationship, nothing. We're here because we wanted you to know that we see now what we couldn't see before. And we're ashamed. My mother's eyes were wet. I spent so much time worrying about Derek. About whether he was happy, whether he was successful. I told myself you were fine because you never complained. But that wasn't fair to you. You shouldn't have had to complain to be seen. Her voice cracked on the last word. We didn't know how to love you both equally. We thought love meant supporting Derek's dreams because they were louder. We didn't realize we were teaching you that your dreams only mattered if they were quiet enough not to bother anyone. I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly. But recognition. They were trying. Imperfectly, late, but trying. I need you to understand something, I said carefully. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. I'm not going to go back to being the person who shows up and disappears and never asks for anything. We don't want you to, my father said. We want to know the person you actually are. Not the person we needed you to be. That's going to take time. We have time, my mother said. As much as you need. We ate slowly. The conversation was awkward, full of long pauses and careful words. But it was honest. More honest than any conversation we'd had in years. Toward the end of the meal, my mother reached into her purse and pulled out an old photo album. I brought this for you. I thought you might want it. She slid it across the table. I opened it carefully. Inside were photos I'd never seen. Me as a baby, held by my grandmother who I barely remembered. Me at 5, covered in paint at a kid's art class. Me at 10, accepting an award at a science fair. Me at 13, standing in front of a painting I'd done for a school project. Every photo showed me doing something I loved. Creating, learning, being myself. Where did these come from? Your grandmother took most of them. She gave me the album years ago and told me to remember who you were. I put it away and forgot about it. I'm sorry for that. But I want you to have it now. I turned the pages slowly, seeing myself through different eyes. Through the eyes of someone who'd actually looked. Thank you, I said quietly. We left the restaurant as the sun was setting, painting the river gold and amber. My parents walked me to my car. This doesn't fix everything, I said. We know, my father replied. But it's a start. He nodded. That's all we're asking for. A start. I drove home with the photo album on the passenger seat. When I got back to my apartment, I sat on the futon and went through it page by page. Each photo was a reminder that I'd always been there. I'd always existed. I'd just been looking for validation in places that couldn't give it. The next morning, I woke up to a message from the tech startup I'd been working with. They loved the final designs and wanted to schedule a launch party. They asked if I'd be willing to speak briefly about the creative process. I said yes without hesitation. The launch party was small, held at a co-working space downtown. Maybe 50 people. I wasn't nervous this time. I knew what I wanted to say. When they introduced me, I walked to the front of the room and looked at the faces watching me. 6 months ago, I said, I didn't believe my work mattered unless someone else validated it. I spent years giving away my creativity, my time, my effort because I thought that's what you were supposed to do. That's what being helpful looked like. I paused. But I learned something important. Your work has value not because someone else recognizes it, but because you created it. And the moment you start believing that, everything changes. The room was quiet, attentive. This project, I gestured to the screens displaying the branding I'd created, represents more than just good design. It represents what happens when you stop waiting for permission to be seen and start demanding it. After the presentation, people approached me with questions and comments. One woman, probably in her early 20s, waited until everyone else had gone. I needed to hear that, she said. I've been doing free work for my boyfriend's startup for a year. He keeps saying he'll pay me when they get funding. But they got funding 3 months ago. I looked at her seriously. Stop working for free. But he says we're a team. Teams pay each other. Teams give credit. If he's not doing either of those things, you're not on a team. You're being used. She nodded slowly, something hardening in her expression. You're right. Thank you. She walked away and I felt that familiar shift. The one that happened when someone realized their worth wasn't negotiable. I packed up my materials and headed home. The city was alive with evening energy, people spilling out of restaurants and bars, the sound of music drifting from open windows. My phone buzzed. A message from Violet. Drinks tomorrow? I have news. I smiled and typed back. Absolutely. Life wasn't perfect. My relationship with my parents was still fragile, held together by tentative conversations and careful boundaries. Derek and I hadn't spoken since his text. My studio was small and I was still building my client base from scratch. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't the driver or the helper or the person who existed only in relation to someone else's needs. I was Nina Reyes. Designer. Business owner. Person who'd learned that sometimes the most important thing you can build isn't a brand or a portfolio or a career. Sometimes it's just the courage to take up space. I walked into my apartment and looked around at the life I'd created. The work on my walls. The projects on my desk. The evidence that I existed not as someone's sister or daughter or convenient favor, but as myself. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.